Anyway, thank you all for coming and welcome to the 2023 Herb Lockwood Prize presentation. And you all got parking spaces and made it through all of this sop again. It just doesn't seem to stop this year. Wow. I'm Fran Stoddard, and this is the 10th year that the prize has been awarded to one of Vermont's most influential artists, musicians, writers, or other creative individuals. It's such a cool prize. For those of you not familiar with the Herb Lockwood Prize, let me just give you a quick summary. The prize, the Herb Lockwood Prize in the Arts, was founded in 2014 by Todd Lockwood and some like-minded Vermonters. They felt that the arts community could benefit by bringing the state's most influential artists to the public attention. Our little state has so much to be proud of. As the idea of an arts prize began to emerge, Todd's late brother, Herb Lockwood, served as the model artist on which this prize is based. Herb was influential in a breathtaking amount and variety of art forms, but he's particularly remembered by his music. Tragically, we lost Herb in 1987 when he was only 27 years old. The Herb Lockwood Prize seeks to recognize artists of comparable creativity and influence, artists who not only produce exemplary work, but who also inspire and encourage other artists. That's what Herb Lockwood did. He encouraged other artists to push themselves and to take chances. Every year, the Herb Lockwood Prize goes about its business, staying completely below the radar. There's no application process, and the artists have no idea they're being considered for it, except for the one person each year who gets a phone call. That surprise phone call. It's kind of like a couple other prizes like it. It's very cool to have one in Vermont. Burlington City Arts Foundation is honored to administer the prize, created through the generosity of a number of private donors. This year, we'd like to thank the following donors who helped make the 2023 Herb Lockwood Prize possible: Todd R. Lockwood, Stephen Kiernan, Pat Robbins and Lisa Schamberg, Mike Gordon, Nat Winthrop, Michael Lipson, and Sandy Berbecco and David Cohen. We would also like to thank the Media Factory for providing the professional video coverage of this event. And now I'd like to welcome one of Herb Lockwood's longtime friends to the podium, Melissa Chestnut Tangerman. Melissa and Herb's friendship began in 1977 at Hamilton College. After graduation in 1982, she was one of several musicians who followed Herb to Vermont. Please welcome Melissa Chestnut Tangerman.
Thanks. Thank you. So we're here to celebrate the recipient of the Herb Lockwood Award, and it's highly likely that many people here don't know who Herb Lockwood was, except for the explanations, because he was only on this earth for 27 years. In his short time, he made a lot of art and a lot of friends. And the art part he made look easy. The friend part was maybe less easy for him because Herb was a magnificent mixture of exuberance and shy reticence. I think Todd will forgive me for saying that Herb was raised in a traditional buttoned-up way, and he was in the full bloom of bursting those buttons when he died. That, for me, is what remains so poignant about his absence from us here, that we were deprived of such a unique, compassionate, quirky, brilliant perspective on the tragicomedy of being human. He was a funny, incisive writer, and luckily for me, I was serving in Kenya as a Peace Corps volunteer for 3 of the 7 years of our friendship, and we corresponded about as heavily as you can when the mail takes weeks to arrive. And I treasure those letters, and I reread them every so often. In college, Herb was an astounding musician. He loved and could play anything with strings, and he was an omnivore of all genres. In his senior year, he discovered ceramics and turned gorgeous, useful pieces. He always doodled and cartooned, and in Burlington, he discovered the livelihood of woodworking. He worked with his boss and mentor, Tom, and threw himself into the craft, the art, and the hard work. This is from a letter from the spring of 1985 when Herb was 24. I look at my hands and I see that they are cut. Tom's machinery is so sharp that I cut my fingers on right-angle corners made on Tom's sharp machinery. These right-angle corners are on pieces of wood. I fucking cut myself on a pine board. Geez, crow. Friday afternoon, and I've just stepped in the door, having dodged my way through the psyched Friday afternoon traffic. I'm exhausted. Well, parts of me are exhausted. Namely, my feet, legs, lower back, and left hand, and the tip of my right middle finger. And don't let me forget my left buttock. I'm glad to be sitting down. We have finally begun the finished work on Tom's house and have spent the last 2 weeks in his shop planing and shaping pine and poplar. Wood, wood, wonderful wood. The shop smells so wood stove friendly and productivity pungent. Smoke, machine oil, sawdust. Tom's ever-present coffee cup, my Icelandic sweater, which is soon to enter its 5th year of not being cleaned, and mostly that earthy aroma of hardwood. If women wore perfume that smelled like a well-seasoned slab of mahogany, men would be totally helpless. Woman president? No problem. Whatever you want, take it. Yesterday, I had a lesson on the joiner, a machine that I have tried for months to master without success. As it turns out, it is a perfect application of Zen in the art of fill in the blank. The joiner is a machine that one can use to make one side of a board perfectly flat. In the hands of a master, 1 or 2 passes over the joiner is usually enough to produce a perfectly flat surface. Simple, no? No. For me, the machine is the ultimate frustrator, and it seems like the harder I try, the worse are my results. I would start with a slightly warped board and push it with all of my strength down onto the blades, only to have it get worse and worse. I would end up totally exhausted, with the board jointed too thin to use, and still with a fucking warp in it. Well, yesterday, Tom gave me a joiner lesson. He did a couple of himself. See? I used no effort. You don't have to provide any strength with this machine. That's the machine's job. Trapped inside every warped board is a flat, wonderful surface at equilibrium. The joiner will find that surface. Your job is to provide a straight line for the blades to follow. You become part of the machine. Soon you won't be doing anything. The wood will joint itself. The important thing is continuity and concentration without effort. Zen or what, man? There are sounds in the shop, too. Real music. Not even atonal. I mean, I'm talking chords. 2 days ago, Tom was running the joiner, and I was cutting dados on the table saw. The blades cutting into the wood was the tonic, the joiner was a minor third above it, and the motor of the table saw sang the 5th an octave or 2 up on the top. Shop filled with awesome, bone-shaking minor chord, the requiem of the dangerous power tools. Later the same day, I was cutting on the table saw, tonic, and Tom had the router running, major third, and when he introduced a wooden burden, it fell a half step, minor third. I shook my head and smiled. John Cage was absolutely right. Music is always happening. Sometimes it's even tonal. Today, I worked alone while Tom drove to Canada to buy some wood, and I sang along with the beautiful note that the joiner, that frustrating machine, does in fact sing quite nicely, produces. The best songs turned out to be The Little Drummer Boy. I always get chills at the line, I have no gift to bring, pa-rum-pa-bum-bum, rum-pa-bum-bum, rum-pa-bum-bum. And of course, Shady Grove, that unkillable song. Bagpipe tunes are also great with power tools. Try some with your motorcycle if you haven't already. That's just one of the pictures of his life that Herb wrote. But he also shared wrestling with life. Oh yeah, there was something else I wanted to talk about, mediocrity. Of all the things the old man regrets, he laments most deeply the fact that all his life he never pulled himself out of mediocrity. I was driving yesterday and I realized that I had been thinking all along that mediocrity is something that happens through complacency. In other words, mediocrity happens, whereas you have to work at excellence. I realized mediocrity and excellence are not so clear-cut. It can take a lot of hard work and ingenuity to produce something that is considered mediocre. Consider good albums versus not so good albums. They may both have had the same amount of energy put into them, but where does excellence begin? In the imagination of the creator or in the eye of the beholder? Maurice Ravel died a miserable man because he considered his work mediocre and his output low, and not nearly up to the level he had expected of himself. These are not foreign sentiments to me. I've been dwelling in a sad place the last several days. The reason is that I heard a John Prine song that made me cry, so I learned it and started to become it, and now I'm working on some sad words to my own sad song. It is a song of loneliness, sung by an old man who realizes he has not done anything that he had dreamed of doing as a young man. He wails, "What if I had done it all differently? Then a different life would have slipped by, and here I'd be, a different lonely man." And after a particularly political and sociological and philosophical rant, Herb writes, "This has been a sober page, except for Champ. Sigh. It's only me, and I need to show you this page." So it's a billboard that says, "What's the point?" And at the bottom, he drew Champ. This is the whimsy of our friend Herb. 27 is so young. When you're 27 and in the throes of synthesis, when your art and your work and your spiritual life and your newfound love are all converging, you are at the very beginning of the best years of your life. There are works ahead of you: music, songs, ceramics, wood, drawing, poems, friendship, children to be created. Reading over Herb's letters at this time in our world, I'm struck at his projection of himself as a lonely old man if he does not take himself by the nape of the neck and make himself make connections, antithetical to his reticence, to his thoughtful, observant, and perhaps risk-avoidant instincts. Creation was Herb's clarion call to courage. Thank goodness. His creative drive, his art, impelled him to interact with a perplexing and messed up world, to connect to the friends in it, to invite others to his whimsical and ultimately loving outlook. What would he make of this world now, 36 years later? He would laugh, of course, and he would make us laugh, and he would cry, and he would make art that would make us cry. He would be touching you. I'm really deeply, deeply grateful to Todd and the donors for establishing this honor in Herb's memory. I hope these words of Herb's paint a little of who he was and provide some connection for, to, and with the recipient.
Wow, that painted such a beautiful, beautiful picture. Thank you so much. And makes it really clear why this prize is so aptly named after Herb. So it's pretty wonderful. Well, last year, in 2022, the Herb Lockwood Prize was awarded to Vermont poet and teacher Karen McCaden. We just talked about how not one of her students in 30 years was named Herb. That's how unique he was. Karen is one of Vermont's most well-regarded poets, and she has introduced countless high school students to poetry during her 30-plus years as an English teacher. We are very thrilled to welcome her back to this event. Karen.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. I was thinking as I was walking down through the rain and the tourists today that if they really wanted to see Vermont, they would come in here and learn about the arts community and what we all do in Vermont. So I had this fantasy of ushering people in, but I was like, maybe not today. There would have been a lot of Vermont sweatshirts in here. So I was trying to think of what to say in gratitude today for the year since I received this award, and there were so many fits and starts, and I would write something and take it away, and maybe I'll take this angle, and maybe I'll take that angle. But I thought I would talk about my parents a little bit and my background and what this award meant to me as someone who got to receive it. I got to receive this award last year with my parents present, and I'm not sure anyone can fully grasp what this award meant to them. My dad is a first-generation American, the son of parents with first and third grade educations. His father couldn't read and was a dock worker in Boston Harbor. My mom is the only child of parents who both worked in the tire rubber factory in Andover, Massachusetts, making Converse sneakers for their entire lives. Neither family ever owned a car. I am a first-generation college graduate on my mother's side and a first-generation woman college graduate on my father's side. I am a statistically improbable arts award winner, just to start things off there. But my parents were also really fun, open-minded people, and there was fertile ground for a poet in our house. We didn't have many books, but we were devoted to the public library. My mom and I read a lot, and my dad is incredibly funny. He loved to tell story jokes, and I know now that joke theory is very closely tied to how poems work. If you think about it, the idea of surprise and switch, the sort of switch and bait kind of structure of a joke and a poem, where at the end of the poem you feel like, oh wait, how did we just get there? And you may not laugh, but you have some deep change of feeling that happens. I am convinced I learned that from listening to my dad tell jokes. We also had an imaginary housemate named Lonesome Weather. Lonesome Weather swung doors open and was responsible for any unexplained house noises. We all knew when Lonesome Weather was hanging out with us, and we would announce his presence. And there were weekly stories of miracle and wonder at St. Bridget's Church. And my grandparents spoke in strange, heavily accented idioms and used words that were made up in the soup of immigrant-rich Boston. In short, what I'm saying is that artists get their training and their chops where they can. I don't think Todd Lockwood knew any of this when he called me last summer to tell me I would be the 2022 recipient of the Herb Lockwood Prize in the Arts. That call came out of the blue. To feel the weight of this award has been an enormous gift. The wind in my sails has been extraordinary. I keep my self-doubt alive, as any artist should, but some days now I feel a little like a giant. Thanks for that. The arts are a real wonderland. When a young artist discovers she is an artist, I'm talking about myself in the third person here, just in case. Here we go. Okay. The word feels magical and new. Finally, there is a language that expresses what she sees in the otherwise untranslatable recesses of her mind. And so she plays and creates and breaks rules and discovers her new language. Then come the gatekeepers and the gates with trick locks. The ideas of audience, of platform, of mentorship, of navigating the profession, of building community with other artists. If she is lucky, and originally from Massachusetts, where being a little pugnacious is cultural, the game of opening the gates is a new art to learn. The arts are somewhat ironically full of gates and gatekeepers, and not so full of celebrations, not so full of gifts, like the award we are here to celebrate. I think that that's an extraordinary part of this award, is that it is out of the blue. You don't have to throw yourself against it. You don't have to apply and wait. You have no idea. And suddenly the gift is upon you. There isn't a day I don't feel giddy to get to be a poet in the way that I get to be one these days, having been blessed by the kind of recognition I used to daydream about. No artist can ever really know the impact their work has in the world. I hope Herb Lockwood has some idea, somehow, of the impact his life as an artist has on the 10 Vermont artists this legacy has now touched. And I just want to say thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah, it's okay, it's just a few words. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Karen, and Melissa again. Was perfect. And I'd like to welcome the Herb Lockwood Prize founder. It's wonderful what you have created here. And he's going to talk about our prize winner, who I will not reveal, but his work, or his? I gave something away. And person are dear to my heart. So Todd Lockwood, please come to the podium and let us know.
So, welcome, everyone. I have a very, very interesting story to share with you today, one that only could have happened in Vermont. And here's how it starts. Here on the cusp of the 10th annual Herb Lockwood Prize, we have begun to see a pattern. A person without fame or wealth or influence hatches an idea and either grows it in Vermont or brings it here when it's still in its infancy. Something about the culture here, the high value Vermonters place on art, creativity, and iconoclastic self-expression, merges with a landscape that helps the mind to enlarge its aspirations. Suddenly, there is a new art form, a new voice, and almost simultaneously a new audience for it. A novel, a poem, a painting, a way of teaching acting, a unique puppet enterprise, a jazz interpretation that brings new energy to a classic song, and raising the bar statewide. This year's Herb Lockwood Prize winner exemplifies this pattern. Born in Vermont, he sent his first signal with the creation of Catamount Arts in 1975. It was an unusual acorn to plant and in stony soil. At that time, the performing arts were not prized in rural areas for their ability to build and foster community, nor for their capacity to strengthen a local economy. He was literally ahead of his time. Catamount Arts today is testimony to how that idea works in Vermont and for Vermont. What began as a staging and production idea has become a vast enterprise, with the central venue of the Community Arts Center in St. Johnsbury, and with connections to more than 40 other arts organizations around the region. A partial list: the Tap into Film 48-hour student film slam, Circus Smirkus St. Johnsbury, the Levitt AMP Music Series, the St. J. Bluegrass Festival, First Night North, plus arts education programs at every school in the region, from open mic events for teens to violin intensives designed to lift children out of poverty. Add the countless arts interns from Northern Vermont University and elsewhere, and Catamount Arts engages with thousands of students every year. The acorn has become an oak. But the impresario had already envisioned a forest. If the arts could flourish in the Northeast Kingdom, could filmmaking be liberated from the high-gloss, high-cost methods of Hollywood? The answer to that question, posed by the creation of Kingdom County Productions in 1991, has been 10 dramatic films and glowing recognition from across the country. It must be noted, however, to show respect that is entirely deserved, this visionary had a co-conspirator, a partner in many, many ways, who has produced 11 documentaries of her own astonishing merit. We can only imagine the level of conversation around that dinner table. Think of it, 21 films made in New England, mostly containing all kinds of allegiances. That is, starting with a novel by an iconic Vermont writer, adding some of the state's finest actors, supported with music by local musicians, comes a film shot mostly in Vermont, edited here too, and welcomed by audiences across the state and beyond. The titles are as familiar as the names of some Vermont towns: Where the Rivers Flow North, Stranger in the Kingdom, Northern Borders, and many more. While cinema is one of the most expensive forms of art, especially compared with a writer and her laptop, a painter and his canvases, this director managed to work with tight budgets and generally local funding, squeezing 6 cents out of every nickel. The resulting films all had one important element in common as a direct result of all the collaboration and inclusion, a form of cinematic gold the major studios can only dream of: authenticity. Yes, there were stars, many: Chris Christopherson, Genevieve Buchholz, Rip Torn, Jacqueline Bisset, Martin Sheen, Tantu Cardinal. Yet the aesthetic core was to celebrate this state and to mine its artistic riches. Cultivating this sort of village of talent is central to who Herb Lockwood was, a person who gathered artists of every stripe and kind, connected them, inspired them, and watched how they lifted one another's work. The forest continues to grow. Now students by the score participate in filmmaking. Some 40 college students involved in the last film by this year's winner. Now a film festival adorns Middlebury every August, each year gaining in audiences and acclaim. All over Vermont, you can find artistic trees as a result of this impresario's invention, imagination, and inspiration. Now that he foresees the end of his filmmaking days, it's important to recognize not only his success, but the success he has enabled for others. Lights, camera, action for a Vermont institution. This year's winner of the Herb Lockwood Prize, Jay Craven. Okay, before I present the actual award to Jay, we have one more speaker that's going to come up, someone who has a deep knowledge of Jay and is interested in sharing some of that with us. So, Jay, why don't you grab a seat and we'll... So please welcome stage and screen actor Rusty DeWeese.
Thanks. 1986, Judavine toured, and Jay brought us up to Catamount Arts. I'm 10 years younger than Jay, and I was 26. And after the show, Jay said, "I'm Jay Craven. I'm going to make movies, and I want you to be in them." 10 or 12 years later, he called and said, I have a part of a fighter that you might be right for. You want to read for it? I was in New York, and I drove up all night, got on my Harley in Elmore and drove up to Peacham and read. And a week and a half later, back in New York, I heard I got the part. Got to work with Rip Torn, who I became friends with, and went back to New York and worked with his daughter and son. And so Jay was right. He was going to put me in his movies. A couple of years later, he said, "I have another movie. A part could be good for you. It's not really in the book, A Stranger in the Kingdom, but for one line. But Harlan Kittredge has been expanded in the movie. Come up and read for it." I was in New York. I came up and read for it. He said, "Oh, that's good, you know." And with auditions, you don't hear right away. So I went back to New York a week later. He said, "I'd like to read you again for Harlan Kittredge." So I came up, and he read me, and I think Brooke was reading the lines opposite me. And she was like, and the audition got over, and Jay was there, standing there, and it's this little room. And he said, "That's good." And Brooke said, "Man, he is this guy." And Jay said, "Let me talk to you, Rusty." He brought me aside, and he said, "This is a movie business, and I need money, and I need stars. And there's a Hollywood star that wants this part, and he's going to decide in about a week. If he doesn't want it, you got it. We'll call you in a week. It's true. So I went back to William Doyle Galleries, where I was working, and I got the call and I got the part. And some people would say, boy, that's rough. But I don't think it is. That's exactly what you want from a director, is the honest, true word. You got it if you don't get it. Because it's not show fun. It's show business. And I learned that from Jay early on, which was a good thing to learn. In Stranger in the Kingdom, when we were going to shoot the scene in the barn where it's a strip show, basically, Jay, we're 20 minutes before we're going to shoot, and he's doing numbers to try to get more funding. Before this scene, he says, Russ, he says, Harlan, you're running this strip show here once the cameras roll, but you know a lot about Vermont lingo. Could go write something more than what we have. So I did, and he said, yeah, that's good, do it. So I learned that I could write stuff, and it worked. And here again, it's show business. So then when I got going with my little 2-bit pony show, I lifted from the model of the J. Craven in the Kingdom County production, which is the posters look great, the pamphlets look great, the banners look great, the movies look great. You deal with the press this way. You cultivate relationships. That's the business. But that's not why we love J. Craven. We became friends soon after that, and I was young and he was young, and we'd have the little breakfasts at 5 degrees below zero in St. J. and talk about what he's doing, what I'm doing. Do the thing that you read about. Those kind of people do. But that's not why you like J. Craven. There's a tradition in the film business, I don't know, a lot of you know this. The last day of an actor. By the way, I read yesterday that Scorsese and De Niro have been working together for 50 years. They've done 10 things together. We got about 36 years, and I counted 17 we've done. It includes the bestest things. So there's a tradition that when you shoot your last scene, maybe I got 3 days on the film, maybe I have 3 weeks, maybe I have 3 months. The director and assistant director know it's your last day, and when you're done, cut. Okay, that's good. Okay, we're moving on. By the way, this is Susie Thomas's last scene, and everybody claps, right? So Jay, I watch. Jay goes around sooner or later to everyone on these sets, whether it's the college people now or the older folks in the industry, and chats with them at some point or another. And he eats with the crew and the cast. So Jay doesn't only recognize a cast member's last day. Jay recognizes anybody's last day if he knows it's the person's last day, and he usually does because he's been talking to the guy that's been cleaning the tables after the dinner. He's been talking to the girl that's been parking the cars, and if that person's there, oh, Susie Davis is going off. She's been done on the film. Let's clap for her. So I don't care about all the creative stuff. I care about that stuff. And that's why we all love our 2023 Herb Lockwood Prize of the Arts Award winner, J. Craven.
Okay, well, I don't know if I can compare to all of this, but I think that, what I'm moved by here this afternoon is the number of people that are here that have connected in one way or another with this 48-year journey of the arts and film in Vermont. you know. And I tell my students, because I now make films, given the impossibility of the film industry, which I discovered early on, but sort of tried to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it looked, which always was the inspiration to do the next film. But at one point, I reached the sort of crucible of having to decide either to stop making films, frankly, or to find some sustainable path. And I brought a dozen students onto my production of Disappearances in 2006, just to see what it would be like to try to integrate students into a film set, and it worked pretty well. And we rented a house, and they came to my living room every day, and we talked film and history and Howard Mosher, and they were sort of PAs and interns on the production. But I always thought, I wonder if we could push them higher into the production, give them more responsibility, do more substantial work. And one day I was at a faculty meeting at Marlborough College, which was beginning to struggle with enrollment. And Ellen Lovell, who was a founding director of the Vermont Arts Council, and which had been very important to me in my early years in Vermont, said to the faculty, does anybody here have a new idea for how we might invigorate and regenerate enrollment and do something new? And I said, make movies with students. She didn't say a word. Nobody did. And 11 months later, in my mailbox at Marlborough, I got a little piece of paper, and all it said was, okay. And we did it. And so, the model shifted, and we started with students from a few colleges, and it has built substantially since then, and we're organizing right now the new edition, which will be my last film, which will be a satire on militarism and poverty, based on George Bernard Shaw's play Major Barbara. And so it's a challenging but really pretty exciting project. Yesterday I was at Mount Holyoke College recruiting the last of the students for the next round, and we will have 47 students from Mount Holyoke and Skidmore and Hamilton, actually one of our big partners, and Bates and Bowdoin and Swarthmore and Sarah Lawrence and Kenyon and Spelman, historically black women's college, where I'm actually going next week on a train since I've decided to stop flying if I can. And they're fabulous, and they bring an energy and an imagination and an idealism and a desire for connection that is just frankly invigorating to the whole process. I was talking, back in the old days when I made movies, I would roll 2 or 3 cigarettes a day to sort of get me through it. But interestingly, I've never had the impulse to do that since I started working with the students. It just automatically, not that I became a smoker, I didn't, but the first thing I tell them when they come together are basically 2 things. One is, all I can promise you is that on day 1 we'll have nothing, and that together we will discover what this movie is. The other thing I tell them is, because some students come in, particularly some of the guys, thinking that the director's job is to boss everybody around. And they become clear very quickly that the director's job is to encourage and support good work from other people, and to build collaboration, and to establish connection. And that's where we start. And so any student that comes into it has to accept that proposition. There's nothing here. Whatever happens is because we're going to make it happen. We'll come in with a script initially, but it'll be debated and critiqued and revised 6 hours a week for 7 weeks. And they're already involved, coming together once a month on Zoom sessions to talk about what draft we're currently in. And so they're already sort of in motion for it. But I think that, my sort of career in the arts is based on the same proposition. On May 1st, actually, I was not born in Vermont. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I was born in eastern Pennsylvania. I came here when I was 23 years old. But and we could talk about Pennsylvania for a while too. But anyway, we had nothing, and the question was, where would this journey lead? And like the film projects themselves, I mean, my goal was always to make movies, but I had to spend 16 years in sort of community work organizing an arts organization before I got to the point of actually making the movies. And that's sort of an unconventional path. And I also want to make a special note that Jody Freed is here today, who took over Catamount Arts after I left 16 years after starting it, and frankly has given it profound and substantial new meaning and dimension for the community, and understands community development and the role that the arts play better than anybody I've ever met. And Jody, thank you for being here. And I think that, there are a number of other people. I'm just going to take a minute to just recognize some of the people that have played a role. Doreen Kraft and I slogged through unpassable roads and woods in Nicaragua in the summer of 1980 in heavy humidity and 100-degree temperatures to make a documentary film on the literacy crusade in Nicaragua, which was one of the very first films I made in Vermont, and was an adventure that I often remember. Also introduced me through this film to the ideas of Paulo Freire, Brazilian educator and a person really believing in the importance of dialogue as for its ability to generate consciousness based on people's own stories coming from where they were and doing what they were doing. And so that the person working in the coffee plantation had important stories, and those stories, once told, became generating forces to raise consciousness and to create power, ultimately. And it is Paulo Freire's ideas that animate my program now, and I state it that way, along with John Dewey's ideas, rooted in Vermont, of intensive learning that enlarges meaning through shared experience and joint action, which to me just hits the nail on the head. To be engaged in a process with students, to be engaged in a process in a community where you can try to work with those ideas is what sort of animated me all the way through. Having come to the arts through a background of activism, this to me was a way to try to use community and culture as a way to animate consciousness and connection. And I continue to believe very strongly in that. And I'm not going to, tell my whole story, but I am going to just also, and then Doreen also co-produced with me the very first performing arts events that I was involved with, Joan Baez at Memorial Auditorium, just days before Bernie got elected mayor. And Bernie actually said, "Can I make an introduction from the stage? Let's remember where Bernie got his last 6 votes that he needed." But anyway, Sarah Katz was a student at Cabot High School who I taught at a residency in her school when she was still in high school. Hiromi in the back row is a classical musician from Burlington who, during the pandemic, contacted me with her 2 partners to make a series of performances in venues in the state of Vermont that were closed because of COVID, which was a great opportunity and adventure. Nat Winthrop is the co-president of my board with Faye Baker, who are both here. And I used to write articles for Nat when he ran the Vermont Vanguard Press, including from Central America, when we were making the movie. Nat also made a behind-the-scenes documentary during the making of my film, Disappearances. Faye has been a stalwart, and her sister was actually my collaborator at Marlborough College for a number of years. Steve Small played a part in my film Disappearances, and worked with Bess in her theater company in Middlebury. Lauren Moy came to us in 1991 and was the key figure in raising the money and producing Where the Rivers Flow North, and again coming back after leaving for a couple of years on Disappearances, and also Windy Acres, I think. Yes, absolutely. And of course, Rusty was also, in addition to doing the films, was the star of Windy Acres, the TV series we made. So, you know, Fran Stoddard was the assistant director on Windy Acres, and also worked with us on the Champlain Quadricentennial, and has been a longtime friend and supporter. And of course, and Pat and Lisa both have been supporters throughout these years of our work. Everybody in this room actually is here. Everybody's got a conflict of interest who has come here, actually. And of course, Bess O'Brien, you know, over and above, who I met at the Flynn Theater because her best friend was an actor in the San Francisco Mime Troupe, and Catamount for a while presented shows in Burlington, and Bess's best friend from college introduced me to Bess, and it didn't even occur to me, but 6 months later she was at my office saying, I've got a theater company and we're struggling and what should I do? And I said, well, we'll help you. 2 weeks later she said, I give up. And a week after that, I said, why don't you come work for me? She said, what would be my job? I said, you can have my job. And I will start making movies. And anyway, it started that way. And I'm not going to, you know, I don't want to talk for a whole long time. I'm just going to just tell one final story. One of the projects that I worked on at Catamount was the creation of Circus Smirkus. And it was, you know, an exciting and really, I think, meaningful project for the kids. Again, experiential learning, the idea of young people working with professional mentors and collaborating with them, really, in putting a show together, going on the road, 60 shows a summer. It was a little bit nuts, the whole thing. But I went to New York City. Rob Merman was sort of in exile and took him to a Ukrainian restaurant. And as we ate borscht, took out a napkin and put down the numbers and came out with the idea to start Circus Smirkus. The very first audition we held for students, they were all Vermont kids, and it was at the Barry Street Armory in Montpelier. And a kid came in, and he brought a borrowed unicycle, and his single mom came with him. He got on the unicycle and fell flat on his face. And we said, you're in. And that first summer was really just fabulous and exciting, and a 10-year-old girl opened the show with just charm and grace and imagination. It was wonderful. And 25 years later, I was at the dinner celebrating the 25th anniversary of Circus Smirkus, and this kid came up and said, Jay, do you remember me? And I looked at him, and he was now 25 years older, and I said, Jade Kinder Martin. He said, yep. That's me. I said, what are you doing? He says, I hold the Guinness Book of World Records for the high wire act. For both the longest high wire act and the fastest at 500 feet above the earth. He said, after Smirkus, I stayed at Smirkus for a couple of years, and I knew that. And he said, then I went to Cirque du Soleil and did my thing, and then I came to Europe, and I met this fabulous woman, and she's a stunt woman in Hollywood movies, and we got a farm in the south of France, and there's 2 mountains beside it, and we built this high wire that goes 2 miles, 500 feet above the earth. He said, I was in the Flying Walendas. I was part of the pyramid. I mean, the one where they have 5 guys and then 4 people and 3 people on top of it, and then I can't even believe it. So I said, Jade, I said, I've been up high a couple of times, and it's windy up there. I said, well, how do you deal with it? He says, that's the one thing. You just lean into the wind. 500 feet in the air. And, you know, for me, the arts have been a high wire act from day one. And the state of Vermont is couldn't be a better place to work creatively and to try to work with this idea of community and culture. But it is an impoverished environment, and money is always a struggle and always an issue. And so for Todd to come forward and offer this recognition in the name of his brother, to me is very touching. Because sometimes in the arts in Vermont, ambition can feel like a curse. And to give a cash award of $10,000 in a state where the top grant you can get through the Arts Council is $4,000 is also generous and meaningful and deeply appreciated. So thank you.
The unveiling of the 2023 Herb Lockwood Prize Award.
Wow. Okay. Great.
Show it to us, Jim.
Thank you, Bess O'Brien. There is my producer.
And last but not least,
Don't forget that part.
the envelope, please.
Okay.